Okay, we're working on Maimonides' introduction to Perek Helek, the Sanhedrin, and the commentary in the Mishnah. I'll review what we did yesterday, and then we'll push on. The Mishnah talks about having a share in the world to come. Whatever that is, those people have, some people don't. And he is giving, it's a long introduction before he actually comes to explain the words in the Mishnah. And he says, I must speak now of the great fundamental principles of our faith. And I told you at the end, read to you at the end of his commentary on Masechet Brachos, there he also spoke about matters of belief. And he said that the most precious thing for me to teach of all things in Torah is matters of correct belief. And here he's talking about the good which will come to a person as a result of fulfilling the commandments. What is that good? That's the subject that he's starting with in this section. And I remarked that, why would he choose that as something that's crucial to discuss? And in this section, he's going to go through all the 13 principles of basic Jewish belief. Why would this be the one to start with? One reason for that is that we have to, when we start talking about a subject, you have to take into account where you're starting from, what's your main focus. And we talk about the purpose, or the goal, or the reason. The question is, whose purpose, whose goal, whose reason? And we talk about the good that will come to you at the end for having kept the mitzvos. We're not supposed to have that as our reason for doing. The highest way to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to serve to Him even if there would be no reward at all. So if your focus is what we are supposed to have as our goal in living, it seems odd that the Rambam should start with the reward that you're going to get for doing the mitzvos. But if you look at it from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's point of view, the whole purpose of creating the world and giving the mitzvos is so that we should get the reward. That's His purpose. So you're talking here from the point of view of what's most important to Him. And then you have to live with the fact that what's most important to Him is one thing, and what's most important to us is something else. And I quoted the Mesilas Yesharim, who says in the first chapter, a person has to know what his obligation is in the world, and he says the Kodesh Baruch Hu created the world for us to get to the world to come. And in chapter 18, he says the chassid, the highest form of serving God, is to do what God tells you to do in order that He should have pleasure, He should have satisfaction for what we do. And I heard on a tape of Yaakov Weinberg of Baltimore, Zichrono Livracha, in Israel in Baltimore, where he says it's not a contradiction, because in chapter 1, he's talking about, I didn't say all of this yesterday, in chapter 1, he's talking about what my obligation is. What's my obligation? Well, my obligation is to do what He wants. What does He want? He created the world so that I should be in Olam Haba. Aha. That's what He wants. Since that's what He wants, it's my obligation to do what He wants. But my obligation on the one hand and my motivation on the other hand are two different things. They're two different things. Well, let's take a very simple example. Let's imagine people, I don't know if this applies to everyone, but let's imagine people who recognize an obligation to pay taxes. I'm obligated to pay taxes. That doesn't tell you why I pay my taxes. Maybe I pay my taxes to avoid going to jail. Maybe I pay my taxes to establish a good business reputation so that I'll be hired by IBM. A person can have many motivations for fulfilling his obligations. Somebody lends, I knew a person, I find this hard to digest, but I know, but he told me that he borrowed money from free loan societies and he paid it back, not because he needed the money. He wanted to establish credit. He wanted to establish that he was a good risk, so that in the future, when he would need money, they would lend him money with confidence. So he was borrowing and paying it back, not because he needed the money at all, just because he wanted to establish credit. So there's a big difference between your obligation on the one hand and your motivation for what you do on the other hand. Chapter 1 says, word for word, I'm telling you, ma chovasa ba'olamo. What is a person's obligation in his world? And the answer to that is, what he wants becomes my obligation. And in chapter 18, he's telling you what my motivation is. So Rambam here, when he's talking to me about the good that we're going to get from the performance of the mitzvahs, he's talking about why HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world the way he runs it, what he wants. And he's starting with what's most important to him, not what should be our motivation. This fellow just came in. You can take this. Okay, now he said this question, what is the good that you get for performing commandments? And there are many different opinions, even among religious Jews, even among Jews who pledge allegiance to the tradition. And he cites 5 different views. One is the Garden of Eden, which is some place where people live and enjoy physically and not subject to the ills of physical world. And of course, if you have a certain view of the good, then that can imply what you hold about evil. And the first group's conception of evil is what's called Gehenna, which is a place where people suffer terrible physical torture. And the second group is hoping, it says the good that will come in the days of the Messiah, when there will be no death, people will live forever, and they'll be like angels, and the earth will bring forth all sorts of abundance. And a third group says that the good is the resurrection of the dead. And means after his death, he will come to a life again, and then again he'll be in a place where he can eat and drink and enjoy, be with his family. And the evil corresponding to the two of those would be not to merit that good condition. And once you hear the third one says that it's the resurrection of the dead, that causes you to think about the first two. Hey, what about the people who lived and did mitzvos and died and didn't see the Messiah because he didn't come yet? They're not being rewarded? How's that work? That doesn't sound right. And in Gan Eden, if Gan Eden is a place in the physical world where this happens, so then the vast majority of people don't get there as far as we know. In fact, we don't know anybody who went there. So how does that work? What I'm pointing out is that these conceptions are not only base in, they're not noble, and they don't speak to spirituality or to ultimate value. They speak to only the physical, but they're also not well thought out. They're not crafted well. These are people who are both not philosophically sophisticated, nor are they logically clever enough to work it out and answer the objections that could be raised. The fourth is the idea that the promises that you have in the Torah, the peace and prosperity and health and long life in the regular conditions of this world, without the Messiah coming, without the resurrection happening, and not in the world, not in the Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden, just in our world to have plenty of success. All of it is physical. All of it is a description of physical. And the fifth one is a combination of all the previous ones. And he says every one of them brings support for their position from either verses in the written Torah, the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, and sources in the rabbinic writings, which, when taken literally, seem to support their view. And that puts in two parts of caution. When he says taken literally, he's implying that not all of them should be taken literally. And number two, they only seem to support their view. But if you think about them more carefully, they won't support their view. And then he says, these are the opinions that they have, but they haven't spent a lot of time on it. They haven't done a lot of research into it. They don't discuss it and analyze it. They don't ask questions and respond to questions. They've taken it simplistically. And then he sort of expresses a dig at them. But I'll tell you one thing that they really do think about, and they analyze, and they discuss and debate, when the resurrection will take place, what will the people be wearing? Will they be wearing the original shrouds that they had? Or will they have new shrouds, the old fashion, the new fashion, and that sort of thing? And then they ask, when the Messiah comes, will there still be rich and poor people, or will everybody have, equity, as they talk about it today? And other similar questions, which he's mentioning here to make fun of them. The fundamentals and the background and all the rest of it doesn't, but these details fascinate them and they invest in them. Now he says, you, however, the person who is writing the commentary in the Mishnah, you're reading thoughtfully. I'm going to give you an analogy with which I can explain to you where they're coming from and the shortcomings of their positions. And the analogy is a matter of education. Your goal is to teach a child to become, listen carefully to what I say. Those of you who don't know me, my training was in mathematical logic. So when I choose my words very carefully. If my words are wrong, then you got me dead. I'm wrong. But if you change my words, then you're probably not expressing what I'm saying. The goal is, the education he's talking about is to educate the child so that when he's adult, he will be able to learn Torah. Not to teach him Torah when he's young. You start teaching him the letters of the Aleph base. Is that Torah? Yeah, sure, it's Torah. But the goal is to make him into the person who could be a Torah scholar when he's mature. Now, how do you start? Well, you start teaching him the Aleph base. Why does he sit there and listen? Well, maybe you lock the door, or you threaten him. But typically, if you have any kindness in you, you offer him rewards. And as he grows, the rewards change. So for little children, it's candy. And for older children, it's toys. And for children beyond that, it might be clothes that they like to wear. And much higher than that is money. Now, he makes he makes this point with emphasis. There's something unworthy and even false in what you're doing, because the message you're sending the child is reading's important because that's how you get candy. Reading's important because that's how you get money. That's how you get clothes. See how important it is? It gets you things that you want. What you want him to graduate to eventually, what you want him to mature into is that this is the most important thing in the world, that nothing else is worth it. To subordinate it to something else is to falsify its essential character. But you can't teach that to a 5-year-old, and you can't teach it to a 10-year-old. And you probably can't teach it to a 15-year-old. So you promise him the kinds of motivations that are appropriate for his age, but you're putting him onto an educational program where your hope is that he will eventually mature to the point where he'll outgrow that whole conception of learning Torah as a means to something else that he happens to want. So you can see that there are dangers here. Some people might get stuck halfway up the ladder and never make it to the. So not only are they living a crude life, a life that's not in terms of what's ultimately valuable, but they're living with a false picture of how the Torah works, what the Torah is. And I gave an analogy. Now, I must tell you, I have a problem because I'm using reading glasses and I can't see you clearly. I can't see if you're raising your hands or not. And I'll put these on when I'm talking and I'll switch back and forth. So now, there's an analogy here to something that he says elsewhere. The Torah describes God in physical terms. The tradition teaches us, and Maimonides believes that he can prove philosophically that God is not a physical object. And it's really pretty bad to think that God is a physical object. If a mature person who understood came to that conclusion, some would even say it's heresy. Why would the Torah describe God in terms that are false and dangerously false, importantly false? It's not like getting Netilas Yadayim incorrect. And the answer he gives is there's no alternative, because many people, maybe even all people, or certainly the vast majority of people, at an early stage in their mental development, are convinced that the world is physical and only physical. And if you start the discussion by saying, I'm going to tell you about something that isn't physical, they hear, you're crazy. Not listening to you, I'm going to the beach. Leave me alone. Not physical? Off the page. Off the page. So you'll never get to them. So you start by describing Kodesh Baruch Hu as physical, you start. Kodesh Baruch Hu himself started. He wrote the Torah, and he wrote the physical descriptions. You start with that so as to keep the people who are primitive enough to think everything is physical on board. But then you teach them, little by little, that there are different ways of expressing things, that words can have different meanings in different contexts, and you can teach them the concepts of the idea that not everything is physical. That is to say, it's not a physical object nor a quality of a physical object. Rambam discriminates the two of those explicitly. But it's certainly real. So that's what he says about the physicality of God. Now here you have the physicality of the world to come. There is a common denominator there. The world to come, for the Rambam, isn't physical at all, and you're describing it physically. God isn't physical at all, and describing him physically. So it sounds like you're pandering to the same immaturity in both cases. The immaturity is the exclusive focus on the physical. For the Rambam, the world to come is only souls, no bodies. Others disagree, but that's his position, stated several times in absolute clarity. And for the Rambam, the soul is a non-physical thing. So in both cases, you have this compromise with the immaturity of the reader. And then the last thing he said, I forget, let's see which page this was on. We get up to page 4, I think. The last thing he said was that the Torah is really, that keeping the mitzvahs is dedicated to human perfection. And the people who have these ideas of the good that's coming from keeping the Torah are completely unaware of what that means, what human perfection is. You see on page 4, now about 5 lines down. Now all this is deplorable. However, it's unavoidable because of man's limited insight, the result of which he makes wisdom something other than wisdom itself, and assumes the purpose of study is the acquisition of honor, which makes a mockery of truth. Our sages call this is what we got up to, learning not for its own sake. Now, maybe I'll leave that for now. There's a whole subject here, but I'll let him say it for the time being, and I'll see whether I'll come back and clarify it. That I had in mind when they said learning not for its own sake. They had in mind the kind of person who performs the commandments and energetically studies the Torah, not for their own intrinsic worth, but for some other purpose in view. Our sages warned against this and said, do not make the Torah a crown for self-glorification or a spade with which to dig. In other words, the Torah shouldn't be a means to anything outside of itself. And they picked two categories of means which are very precious to most people, maybe to all people. One is reputation, honor, glory, a crown, or a tool with which you can acquire wealth. With a spade, you can build, you can plant. So it's either reputation and glory on the one hand, or it's wealth on the other hand. Don't make the Torah into either of those things. They hinted at what I've just explained to you, that the end of wisdom is neither to acquire honor from other men, nor to earn more money. One ought not to busy oneself with God's Torah in order to earn one's living by it, nor should the end of studying wisdom be anything but knowing it. The truth has no other purpose than knowing that it is the truth. Since the Torah is truth, the purpose of knowing it is to do it. Now, okay, so let me stop here for a second. So let me see if I can give you an example of the kind of degradation we're talking about. Let's suppose that we have a person who is a world-famous surgeon. He himself has invented certain surgical techniques. And Einstein has an aneurysm, and they wheel in Einstein, and they say, we've chosen you to work on Einstein's brain because you're the top. Okay, and now you're going to do surgery. Now imagine this guy doing surgery, and then he says, are the cameras rolling? Make sure the cameras are going. What? I'm working on Einstein, right? Make sure the cameras are going, right? And but you're working on Einstein. You're going to save Einstein's mind. Yeah, but the cameras should be rolling. That's very important. So apparently he thinks that working on Einstein's brain is his way of becoming famous. What? You're saving Einstein to become famous? You don't realize that Einstein's brain is more important than your fame? If there weren't any cameras, you wouldn't do it? You'd let it go by because you wouldn't get fame out of it? What's wrong with you? Einstein is a mainstay of billions of people live off of Einstein's ideas. You're saving something that's gigantically precious. All you can think about is the fact that you're going to get fame out of it. I think we could hear there's something very crude, childish, childlike in that kind of a conception of working on Einstein's brain as a way to increase your fame. It's a failure to appreciate the value of what you're doing. So that's what the Rambam is saying here. If you understood what Torah is, you understood what it's for, what it accomplishes, so then you would appreciate that you wouldn't think of doing it in order to get anything else out of it at all. You would make it the end of your activities, not a means to something else. That's what the Rambam is saying. Now, the next sentence will require some thought. He says, the end of wisdom is neither to acquire honor nor money. One ought not bother himself with God's Torah in order to earn one's living, nor should the end of studying be anything but knowing it. The truth has no other purpose than knowing that it is the truth. Since the Torah is truth, the purpose of knowing it is to do it. Now let's see. You just told me that the purpose of knowing it is just knowing it. Nothing other than knowing it. And now you tell me, since the Torah is truth, the purpose of knowing it is to do it. Well, doesn't that mean now that knowing it is for the sake of doing it, which is something else. Knowing it is one thing, and doing it is something else. So, you tell me the purpose of knowing is just knowing, and then you tell me the purpose of knowing is doing, and doing isn't knowing, it's something else. On the surface, that sounds like a contradiction. And here's a fairly deep point. The question is, what is the subject matter of the Torah? You're learning it, and your purpose is to know it. But what's the it that you're knowing? So when we think about learning and knowing, we think about facts, truth, information. How many stars are there in the Pleiades? Over 100. How many people are there in China? What's the height of the tallest person on earth? Facts. What if something that you could know would be what is to be done? You could know what it is that must be done, should be done, right to be done, what deserves to be done. What if you know practical truths? Not just what Aristotle called theoretical truths, but practical truths. If I know a practical truth, then of course I'm going to do it unless something stops me, because it's the truth. It's just like learning that something's true, so you believe it because it's true. But if the thing doesn't just say the way the world is, but says what is to be done, then you do it because that's the truth about what is to be done. And the deeper fact here is that the word in Hebrew, which is usually translated as truth, the word emes, doesn't mean truth, even though that's what it says in the dictionaries. The dictionaries have mistakes in them. Lots of mistakes. The word emes in the Tanakh is a description of action. It says a number of times, you do emes. You can't do truth. You can't do truth, not in English. And they have a word for truth in Hebrew, not emes. You can't do that either. Yasisa imadi chesed ve'emes. You should do with me kindness and emes. Can't do truth. Emes is a quality of action. Actions can be emes. Odessa has this in an essay of his. So if what you know is what is to be done, then of course you're going to do it. That's part of knowing it. Just like part of knowing a fact about the world is believing it, so part of knowing what is to be done is doing it, unless something stops you. Yeah.
Why can't somebody know but not do?
You see, it depends upon what he knows. Let me ask you this. Can you know without believing?
Yeah.
Surely not, right? If you know that it's after 7 o'clock, part of knowing is believing it. That's because it's a fact about the world. But if you know that this is to be done, that would mean taking everything into account, this is the way to go. So then it doesn't leave you any, in your mind there are no alternatives. In your mind there's only this. This is the only thing to do. So then you're going to carry it out in action. So that's because it's the kind of thing you know. When we speak about knowledge, we don't often think about what we used to call practical knowledge, praxis. We think of theoretical knowledge. But if you know what is to be done, then you're going to do it. So it's not external to it. Knowing it is going to include doing it when it's the kind of thing that you know. What you know is what is to be done. I think that's the bridge that the Rambam has in mind here. So now, here it comes what I told you before in the name of the Mesilas Yesharim. A good man must not wonder, if I perform these commandments, which are virtues, and if I refrain from these transgressions, which are vices, which God commanded us not to do, what will I get out of it? A person should not say that. This is precisely what the child does when he asks, if I read, what will you give me? The child is answered in some such way, I'll give you this, I'll give you that. Because when we know his limited understanding and his desire for something other than the real goal, we answer him on the level of his folly. As it is said in Proverbs, answer the fool according to his folly. So now, at the very beginning on page 1, he started telling us what the good is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give us. Here he's telling you, but you shouldn't serve God for that good. That shouldn't be your goal. The Torah, studying Torah and performing the commandments is a good in and of itself. Now, in order to try to make sure there's no confusion, I have to introduce a concept to you which underlies something I've already said and other things that the Rambam says. In English, we often say, I did A for B, for the sake of B. Those simple words have two different meanings. I'll illustrate it for you, and then I'll describe to you what the meanings are. You see me in my backyard building a tower. And you say, why are you building a tower in your backyard? And I say, you see that hill over there? I want to be able to see over the hill. So I'm building a tall tower. When I stand on the tower, I'll be able to see over the hill. Oh, now you understand why I'm building the tower. Now let's say that I finish the tower at 3 a.m. It's dark. So, okay. Baruch Hashem, I finished the tower, and tomorrow I'll climb the tower. I'll see over the hill, because that's what I wanted. In this case, building the tower is a means to seeing over the hill. The means is completed at 3 a.m., and seeing over the hill will be tomorrow at 7 a.m. Okay. Now, in the next case, you see me in George's backyard building a tower. And you say, Gottleib, why are you building a tower in George's backyard? I said, tell you why. Because 2 years ago, my business was failing, and George loaned me $250,000 at no interest. And a year and a half, 6 months ago, I paid him back and saved my business. So I owe George. I owe him. He really did something good for me. I happen to know that George wants a tower in his backyard. So I'm doing him the favor of building him the tower in his backyard. George is in the Bahamas. He won't be back for 3 weeks. Just enough time for me to build the tower in George's backyard to repay the favor he did for me. Okay, now tell me. I'm doing this with the time to make it simple and vivid. Suppose I finish building George's tower in his backyard at 3 a.m. When did I finish paying back the favor? Isn't the favor paid back when I finish the tower? The tower is the favor. I built him the tower to pay back the favor. So the favor that I did for him, providing him with a tower, is finished when I finished building the tower. In this case, building the tower is doing the favor. They're identical. They're two descriptions of the same event. When I built the tower for myself so that I could see over the hill, building the tower was one event, and seeing over the hill was a separate event. It took place at different times. I finished the tower at 3 a.m. I saw over the hill at 7 a.m. One was a means and one was an end. If A is a means to B, A and B are two different events. They're related as one serves the other. When I build the tower in order to repay a favor, They're not two different events. The building of the tower is the repaying of the favor. Once the tower is built, the favor has been paid. It's just two different descriptions of the same event. Now, when you asked me, Gottlieb, what are you doing in George's backyard, building a tower in George's backyard, you only knew one description of the event. Gottlieb is building a tower in George's backyard. That description didn't explain to you why I'm doing it. I tell you, what I am doing is paying a favor. That's a different description of the same event. And that being the case, you now understand why I'm building it. Because it has this other description. But it's not another event. It's not a separate event. It's not a means. So when you say I did A for B, A in order to accomplish B, you have to ask, does that mean A is a means to B? Or are we talking about where A and B are different descriptions of the same event? You see me handing Peter $500. Why are you doing that? I could say, I want to earn his goodwill because next week I'm going to ask him for a favor. Then giving him the $500 is a means, and next week I'll ask him for a favor. That's the goal that this is a means for. But suppose I say, I borrowed $500, I'm paying it back. So now, handing him $500 is one description, and paying back a loan is another description of the same event. It isn't that I give him the $500 now so that tomorrow it'll be paid back. Giving him the $500 is paying it back. It's the same event, the same action. It just has a different description. So when the Rambam said before that you learn Torah before mitzvos in order to achieve perfection, it doesn't have to mean that learning Torah is a means to an end called perfection. Learn Torah today, and 6 weeks from now, the perfection will come in the mail. No, it can mean that the learning of the Torah is the perfection. Only you didn't know it under that description. You thought of it as just an intellectual accomplishment. No, it isn't just an intellectual accomplishment. It's a spiritual accomplishment. It's a godly accomplishment. And that explains what its significance is. That's not a means to an end. And Maimonides stresses here, you shouldn't make it a means to something else. When you have two different descriptions of the same event, it's not a means for something else, it's the same thing. That's why a crown is a piece of metal you wear on your head. The goal of it is honor. Honor is something it causes. It isn't the honor if you put it in when you're in isolation. It doesn't do anything for you. A spade with which you dig holes, the spade isn't the money. The spade is something with which you'll make the money. The check will come in the mail next month. Here, learning Torah and performing mitzvos is the perfection of the human being. So when he says you're doing it for the sake of human perfection, it doesn't mean that it's a means to an end, something other than itself. It's describing what it itself is. Yeah, you have a question.
So in the example that you gave with the tower, so the objective was to do the neighbor a favor.
Right.
So what is the objective where the Rambam describes like learning Torah? What is the objective? So if you say this is learning the perfection, the is being in state of perfection, but what is the objective?
So what you're asking for, you're using an interesting word. It's like not bad. It's a neutral word, objective, because that's good. That could cover either a redescription or it could cover a means to an end. Well, let me start with a very low level, and then as we go through, we'll get to a higher level. The highest capacity of a human being is his intellectual capacity, and knowledge is the perfection of the intellectual capacity. Intellectual capacity's job is to deliver knowledge, to produce knowledge. And the more noble the knowledge is, the greater perfection to the intellectual capacity you get. you may have heard of children. I know a person like this. When a child read a whole encyclopedia, from Aardvark to Zizigi, all the way through, from A to Z, right? And I asked the person, why did you do that? It's because it's full of facts, full of interesting facts, you know. So I asked the person, what about the telephone book? Every line in the telephone book has another fact. He lives here and this is his telephone number. And you have 1,000 pages. And each one has 400 blah, blah, blah. You could spend a lifetime just reading your telephone book. They're all facts. Yeah, but they're not all equal facts. Not all equally interesting facts. Not all equally important facts. So you say, well, if the intellectual faculty has as its job to produce knowledge, just read the telephone book. It's not just knowledge, it's important knowledge. Significant knowledge, meaningful knowledge. Now, the knowledge of the creator of the universe and the knowledge of his will and the knowledge of the way he runs the world is the most noble knowledge that there is. So already you see that learning Torah perfects the intellect of the person. And that's what makes him into something valuable. So that's the objective. The objective is the perfection of that faculty. Now there are other faculties and other types of perfection and so forth and so on, but it isn't that you learn and then you get a check in the mail, or you learn and then your hair turns white or something. No, the learning itself is the perfection of the faculty. So it's not a means to an end, it's just another description of what's happening.
So maybe you can say correct me if I'm wrong, so maybe the purpose is the process of perfection or striving to higher level of perfection?
No. This is extremely important. There are three separate things here. There's, let's say, your intellectual capacity. That's your IQ, right? Then there's the process of acquiring knowledge. And then there's the acquired knowledge, the knowledge that you actually acquired. The thing that's valuable is the third, and only the third. If you could have the knowledge by pressing a button, press the button. It's not the process of acquiring the knowledge that's valuable, it's having the knowledge that's valuable. That's what he would call the actualized intellect, where actually, that's the goal. That's what you go into the world with, and the world to come with. So, he's told us now that all these motivations for the child are because of the child's immaturity. Well, the obvious implication for the 5 groups who had their pictures of the world to come, they're thinking of the picture of the world to come, the picture, as the motivation for doing the mitzvos, learning Torah, doing the mitzvos. This is what you're being promised. So this is why you will do it. And they are at such an immature level that the why for them has to be physical. And therefore all of these pictures of the world to come are physical. He's telling us that there's a very profound mistake here, because the Torah and mitzvos, which you are being motivated to do, if you only understood what they really are, you would find it degrading to do the mitzvos for the sake of wine and fine houses and fine clothes and even long life and health, physical promises. You would find it degrading because it in itself is worth more than all of the things that you're being offered. So these groups are representing the kind of motivation that's appropriate for people who are immature, people whose intellect has not been developed. And that's why these things are found in our writings. Yes, they are found in our writings, but they apply to this kind of immaturity, and they do not give a true picture of what the world to come really is, and what the reward really is. The bottom of page 4, just a little bit. Our sages have already warned about this. They said that one should not make the goal of one's service of God or of doing commandments anything in the world of things. Antigonus Ish Socho, a man who achieved perfection and grasped the truth of things, meant precisely this when he said, Do not be like the servants who serve their master for the sake of receiving a reward, but be like the servants who serve their master without expecting a reward. He meant by this that one should believe the truth for the sake of the truth, or relate to the emes because of emes. We say of such a man that he serves out of love. To him the sages have applied the verse. His profound desire is Nevad's God's commandments. Rabbi Eliezer said, in his commandments, not the reward of his commandments. He desires the commandments. He doesn't desire the reward of the commandments. Why? Because he understands the intrinsic value of the commandments. Desire is appropriate when it's applied to something that's really valuable. That's what desire is for. It's for motivating you to go after what is really valuable. Now, when he says that he serves out of love, that also comes out of the blue here. It's not clear how that relates to what's been said before, and maybe I'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. Okay. Yeah.
He says the goal should not be anything in the world of things. That implies that maybe something out of the world of things could be a goal, except for...
Yeah, I think things here means the physical world.
Right, so the next world could be a motivation, but we're saying not. We're saying that it can't, even the next world shouldn't be a motivation.
I'm not following you. Say it again.
We're implying that the next world, which is not a world of things, according to Rambam, should be a motivation.
Yes.
But
It.
that we're saying, right, we're also saying that it shouldn't be a motivation.
Well, there's a difference between can be and ought to be. I'm going to check the Hebrew on that. I'll check the Hebrew over here, and I'll answer you tomorrow. So, because, you see, to say that A is wrong doesn't mean that everything else is right. It just means A is wrong. There may be other wrong things as well. So, it's certainly wrong to learn Torah and to do mitzvahs for the sake of anything in the physical world. It might be also wrong for things in a non-physical world. Might also be wrong. So,